Well, thank you for inviting me out here. The material today is it's a little dry. It's IT stuff, so if you'll bear with me, I'm going to hopefully make this valuable. First thing I want to share with you is I'm an IT professional. I've been doing this many years, but even as an IT professional, I make mistakes. The other day, I needed to buy a new laptop for myself. Every one of my kids, I have 5 kids. Every time one of my kids graduates high school and they go off to college, I give them my work laptop. Well, with 5 kids, some of those are real close together, so I don't get to keep these laptops very long. But in doing so, I wanted to get a laptop with a bigger screen, so I was shopping around for a laptop with a bigger screen, and I found one that I liked. I didn't want a CAD system, which a lot of the bigger screen laptops are like computer-aided design, so I found one that I liked, and I ordered it, and thought this is going to be great. It's light, it's thin, but it's got a 17-inch screen, which I wanted. Well, that's the power brick. It's literally the size of a brick, right? So my point in saying this is I'm an IT professional. I've been doing this many years and I missed that. So now I carry this thing around with me on my laptop. So us IT guys, we're not perfect. We make mistakes. I'll give you another good story. Years ago, I worked for an energy company in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm working on my computer, and this is many years ago. You guys probably remember Hotmail. I think it may even still be around. And I was going to check my personal email, so I go to a browser, I'm in a hurry, and I'm doing something not really focused. Instead of typing in H-O-T-M-A-I-L, I typed in H-O-T-M-A-L-E. So, very embarrassing. I could not unplug the computer fast enough. The pop-ups were coming in so fast and furious. There was like smoke coming off the monitor. It was pretty awful stuff, very embarrassing. I had to explain that to the upper-level IT team back in those days, and they don't believe you when you say, that was an accident. Yeah, that was an accident. So we're going to be talking about how your insurance providers and your lending institutions are changing the landscape of cybersecurity. You know, I can talk about cybersecurity and what you should or shouldn't do, and you may say, you know, it's a lot of expense. I'm going to go ahead and let my insurance broker protect me because I have insurance, so I'm not going to spend as much money on the services that maybe you offer or that, you know, people are telling me I should have because I've got insurance. The insurance brokers have figured this out, that is the fail-safe for a lot of organizations, and now they're starting to mandate that you have certain things in place. A good example, a company that I'm familiar with, I won't name them, but an insurance broker was telling me the other day that about 50% of all the insurance brokers out there have dropped cyber liability insurance. They don't offer it. Many of you have probably noticed that your insurance broker is no longer offering you that as well. Even if you can find a broker that offers it, the hoops you have to jump through are pretty extreme. They're even extreme by our standards. Some of the things they're asking you to have in place, very expensive. So today we're going to be talking about what are those hoops. What are the different things that they have on those so you can kind of understand as you go through that renewal what they mean. You know, what do you really need, what's real, and what do they actually do for your organization. Also, your banks are doing the same thing. If you go to a bank today and you want to take out a loan, their insurance brokers that cover them are telling them that their clients also have to have these same things in place, so the banks are passing that through. Lastly, an IT company like us, we're getting pressure from our insurance broker. My premiums will double for the 3rd year in the row this year. It's 3 years of doubling. And we have to pass that along to our clients as well. And then we also can't just pass the cost along, we have to start mandating what our clients have to have in place to be secured. And it's all about risk, right? Your insurance brokers are trying to mitigate their risk. They want to make money, they don't want you to have claims, and the only way they're going to do that is to enforce your security measures in your organization. So the concern right now, ransomware. Everyone's heard about ransomware. It's hitting people. Everyone knows some business or knows of a business that's been hit with ransomware in the last year. Colonial Pipeline's one of the big ones. Kronos, the time and management, took down tons of hospitals' time and management systems. Ransomware is a horrible thing. One of the things about ransomware is the insurance brokers now are starting to deny claims based on if the ransomware is considered a third, they call it cyber war. If it's considered cyber war. So in other words, if they can track back that this is coming from a Russian hacking group that is sanctioned by the Russian government, they're not going to pay you because that's cyber war. They don't pay for war. So they're finding ways not to pay those claims now. So even though you may have coverage, who attacks you if you get ransomware may mean you can't even file a claim. You got to start looking at those policies to make sure that you're truly covered. And then the lack of security. as a company that works in healthcare, we've been working in healthcare for over 13 years, we've seen everything. We've seen hospitals that are incredibly secure. We've seen hospitals that are even over the top secure, where we're like, I don't know how you can even be productive. And we've seen hospitals that have no security. So we've seen the entire gamut. The hospitals that have low security, we've seen them get ransomware, lose everything, premiums go up, and barely survive, or maybe not survive at all. So lack of security and ransomware do go hand in hand. However, lots of hospitals that have great security still get ransomware. I had the pleasure of getting to interview Alan Lovelace with Stillwater Regional Medical Center out of Stillwater, Oklahoma. Alan runs about a 4,000 user hospital. They got hit with ransomware. In that incident, they had about, I think it was a $3 million policy. The policy paid out $500,000, and then they lost 10% of the revenue in the month that the incident happened. That was $2.5 million. That's their estimate. Now, that's not hard written yet. So $500,000 payout from the insurance broker, $2.5 million loss in the month that the incident happened. It's a big deal. So what are the drivers? Again, insurance carriers, brokers, lending institutions, state and federal government, which we haven't talked about yet. IT support and services, that's companies like mine. We're being squeezed, we got to squeeze our clients. And then other vendors. So it's pretty obvious, but when you actually see how the pressures come down, it makes a little more sense. So as you can see up here, the insurance carriers are squeezing the lending institutions, which are squeezing the IT service providers. The insurance carriers are squeezing the IT service providers directly, and then we're squeezing the healthcare providers because we got to make these changes. Because if we don't, if you have a ransomware incident, your insurance provider, if you have it, is going to sue us and ask us to prove that we took the measures in place to protect you, and then all these other people get involved as well. And then you got the government wants to get a piece of this, right? Because everyone is saying, why don't we have government regulation that protects the hospitals and the other organizations? So then we have the government getting involved, and the government tells the insurance carriers what they have to do, who tells us what we have to do. They tell the lending institutions what they have to do, which tell us what we have to do. And then they all tell the healthcare providers as well. So everyone's being told what we have to do. And we're going to talk about what are those things that they're telling us that everyone has to do, and what do they mean? And one of the things here that you'll notice is it all ends up impacting the patient in care, in cost, and so on. And the patient is the one that elects the government that makes all these things happen. So it does a circle. So what is required? Well, first of all, cyber liability insurance is not really a requirement. As far as I know, there's no requirement for it anywhere. But if you don't have it, you're probably not going to have a job if you ever have an incident, because people are going to say, why didn't you have cyber liability insurance? So the insurance itself may not be required, but you're going to have it. So it's going to be a little dry, so bear with me. I'm going to try to get through these pretty quick. So this is a list of questionnaires that our clients have sent us. So as hospitals go to renew their insurance, some of you may have already seen these, they are starting to send these questionnaires out. And there's almost always a ransomware addendum or add-on that you have to fill out separate about the way you secure your hospital. And so we're going to touch on some of these questions. So does the applicant publish and distribute written policies and procedures regarding computer and information security to its employees? Do you have an employee handbook? Do you have a list of the things the employees are allowed to do on the network, what they're not allowed to do on the network? If an employee leaves the organization, do you have a data destruction policy in place? How do you recover their devices? Do you have all that stuff written down? And if you do you keep it up to date? And does it actually happen the way you write it down? Does the applicant conduct computer and information security training for every employee that has access to computer systems or sensitive data? There was a lawsuit in England about 5 years ago. An employee at an accounting firm received a phishing email asking them to send several $100,000 to a bank account. The employee did. The organization sued the employee because it was a phishing email. The employee fought that in court and said, you didn't provide me the effective training to be able to determine whether that was a phishing email or not. The employee won. So your employees, someone in your organization that has that authority, if they've not been provided the training, may actually be able to send funds out of your organization through a phishing email or something like that, and you have no recourse. Does the applicant enforce a process for the timely installation of software updates and patches? If yes, are critical updates patches installed within 30 days of release? So if you've got a small hospital or clinic, and you have Windows Update just turned on all your computers. That's kind of what we all expect. You see them pop up every now and then. Those fail a lot, and when they fail, you stop getting updates. The only way that you can manage those is through a centralized system, a third-party software that ensures that those patches get applied and reboots the computer and gives you reporting and so on. So if you're a hospital, you should have that in place, or a third party that manages that for you and can show you that that's being done. Just having updates automatically run is not effective. And the way you find out they're not running and they're not working is when you get ransomware from a zero-day exploit on a website that an employee went to. So don't leave that up to chance. You need to have software that will manage that. Does the applicant restrict user rights on computer systems such that individuals, including third-party service providers, have access only to those areas of the network or information that is necessary for them to perform their duties? In HIPAA, that's called the minimum necessary rule. In other words, if you have someone that works the front desk and they don't need access to every patient records, they shouldn't have an administrative account that can see everything in the system. One of the examples I like to use, and this is not an incident that's happened, but one like this has that I can't actually name, but in Oklahoma, Garth Brooks lives in Oklahoma. So Garth Brooks, big famous celebrity. If Garth Brooks goes into a men's clinic to get something looked at, and one of the people there sees him come in and they shouldn't have access to his records, and they go find out Garth Brooks was getting some kind of procedure that may be embarrassing, they put it on Facebook, and then that comes out and they come back and they say, well, did that employee have the minimum necessary access? Well, if they did have more access than they should have, the organization is going to suffer for that employee's bad decision. If they didn't have it, well, then it wouldn't have happened. So, which of the following procedures is the applicant employ to test computer security controls? Testing. So we've got internal vulnerability scanning. That's not as simple as saying, do we have things going on our network? It's an actual active scan that needs to be going on inside your network looking for threats all the time. It's also called threat hunting. External vulnerability scanning against internet-facing IP addresses. So on your network, you have the internet comes in, you've got usually a firewall between you and the internet and everything in your network. That firewall can have open IP addresses. So it's like doors that open into your servers and other equipment that allow people to come in. If you've got terminal servers, Citrix servers, those all come in through those doors. Those doors need to be scanned to see if they're locked, unlocked, and what they're going to let in. And if anything that's on the other side of that door that is not secured or properly patched, people can then access that through exploits. So you need to do an external vulnerability scan to verify that. Penetration testing is kind of in the same line, making sure that people can't get into your systems through common exploits. Does the applicant store data in any of the following environments? And is such stored data encrypted? So one of the things people will tell me, we'll do an assessment, and before we even get started, I'll say, where do you store electronic protected health information? And what people will tell me, only on the server. You know, we have Citrix, or we use a third party, like another hospital chain that manages our medical record systems. I'll say, okay, you don't have any EPHI anywhere else? No, we don't. Okay, so I'll go to the front desk, and the first thing I do is I look at the receptionist's computer where they scan in everyone's health cards, everyone's medical records, all their x-rays onto that computer, and then they upload it to the medical system. And there'll be thousands of electronic protected health information records sitting on that computer almost every single time. So what we say to everyone is, don't assume you don't have EPHI somewhere just because you use a third-party cloud provider like Athenasoft or any of those. Assume you have it everywhere, and so what we say is encrypt it all and let God sort it out. Because if it's encrypted and someone gets a hold of that laptop, that doctor's laptop, so let's say your doctor has a laptop, he takes it home, he leaves it in his car, and he gets his window busted out and someone takes off with him. If there's medical records on that system, then those records are now, you have to report that to the Office of Civil Rights. If it's encrypted, it's called a safe harbor. It's a HIPAA safe harbor. Now you don't have to report anything. Doesn't matter. It's as if it didn't happen, because there is almost no way in a billion years that someone can decrypt encrypted files in that manner. All right, so portable media. So one of the things that gets missed a lot is this portable media. Almost everyone, for at least for a long time, I don't know if it's as popular as it once would have a USB drive on their keychain. And they may transfer, we call it sneakernet, right? You put on your sneakers, you put some data on your USB drive, and you walk it over to Susie's computer, and you plug it in, and you take it off. That's sneakernet. Well, if you're transferring that data on a USB drive that's not encrypted, and that employee owns the USB drive, they think they're doing you guys a favor by moving files from point A to point B. But that file goes home with them. That's outside the control of the organization. There's no assessment on that. There's no auditing for that. That is bad. So you need to make sure that all of your USB drives, every device that's portable media that can be used in your network is controlled. Another good example. I had a friend many years ago, was in the Army, and he had there was a colonel that had someone come into his office. It was a consultant. And he tells a story about this consultant's talking to this colonel. While talking to him, her phone starts to die. She doesn't even think about it. She just gets her cord out, plugs it into her phone, and reaches over to his computer and plugs her phone into his computer. So her controlled device just connected to a government computer, and this could totally be compromised. The colonel immediately shut down the meeting, said, stay here. They had to bring in a bunch of DOD inspectors and everything else, had to go through her phone. They confiscated it. She never received the phone back because people don't think about that. And there's ways to secure that kind of thing, right? But that's a good example of how things can get connected to your network and cause damage. Another good example, you've got an employee, every day they come in, they've got their cell phone, they plug it into their computer, and that computer through that USB cord allows the phone to interact with the computer. Well, that employee may hand their phone to their kids every day. And just like they go to church and their kid's board or the grandkid's board, or where they hand the phone to the kid. Well, the kid installs every app that they can find. That's all they do for an hour, installing apps, right? So, because you want the kid to be happy. Well, the next thing you know is you've installed all kinds of compromised apps on this phone, and you just had some employee plug it into your network at the hospital, and those apps are going to try to attack your network. So, that's another reason why you want to lock that stuff down. All right. Let's see, backup tapes. If you're using tapes, stop using them. There's better ways to do things. At rest within computer databases, yes, you want to encrypt your databases. Most of the electronic medical records companies now are encrypting their databases. Does the applicant outsource any of the following? Data center hosting, managed security, alert log monitoring. There's nothing wrong with outsourcing it, but if you do outsource it, they're going to want to know why. What are they doing with that data? They're also going to want to know if they have a business associate agreement on file with the outsourced company. And that's one of the things that always shocks me. When we go do an assessment for a hospital, one of the first things that we ask for is a BAA. 80% of the time we're told, what's that? Well, it's a business associate agreement. It's required by HIPAA compliance for you to have me even look at your systems. Do you have any of these on file for any of your vendors? No. Well, here's a copy of ours. Use it as a cookie cutter. Go make all your vendors sign this. So let's get you on track, right? Because if you ever have an incident, one of the first things they're going to do is they're going to come out and say, who's your HIPAA compliance officer? Then they're going to sit down with your HIPAA compliance officer and go, where's your HIPAA compliance handbook? When was your last risk assessment? They're going to go through all that stuff. So try to have that stuff done. It's better to have something that you don't follow or maybe don't follow correctly than have nothing at all. Does the applicant have centralized? We'll go to the next one. Does the applicant have a disaster recovery plan? Most hospitals do have a disaster recovery plan. Do they actually test it? In my experience, not effectively. Because testing a disaster recovery plan is not as simple as saying, we're all going to run on paper or we're all going to do this or that. Testing a disaster recovery plan is literally restoring all of your data on your servers to a separate place where you can verify that those servers came up and are fully operational. That doesn't happen. What most IT departments and IT people do, what they consider a disaster recovery plan is, whenever you get a backup that's done, it sends a notification saying, backup success. I've seen so many times where you see just success after success, that when we need to go to restore that data, it's failed. Because success means that the data went from point A to point B. It doesn't mean that the data is recoverable. The only way you can validate recovery is to restore that data into an actual environment where you can access it, like your electronic medical record system. Launch that thing, start the application, make sure you can get into it. A business continuity plan. It's kind of right in there with disaster recovery. That's more along the lines of if your facility's burned down, you have fire, flood, tornado, hurricane, how are you going to function in those situations? And it's a response plan for network intrusion and virus incidents. This is new. Nobody used to really think about that. You'd think you'd get a virus, your IT guys are going to clean the virus off. Now with ransomware, it's worse than a hurricane. It's worse than a tornado. It's worse than a flood. And the reason it's worse is because all your physical infrastructure is there, but you can't access it. So you'd be better off if the whole building was destroyed, because at least you say, hey, that was force majeure, act of God. I can't do anything about that. But when you get ransomware, the whole world looks at you and says, well, why didn't you protect yourself better from that? So now you've got to start defending yourself. But you don't have any way to recover because all of your infrastructure is tied up. So what you have to do is go buy all new infrastructure. You have to try to recover and pay the ransom, which takes weeks usually. I think it took about a week for Stillwater Regional to negotiate buying back the data that was ransomed by the third party on their environment, and you're down during that time. You're on divert, right? So having a plan to be able to recover is really, really important. All right. Backing up data. This is pretty cut and dry. When they ask this question, do you have a full backup? Yes. Do you have an incremental? You certainly have an incremental. They're going to ask you, how often do you back up? Where do you back up to? But the two big questions that they care about, especially with HIPAA compliance, is your data encrypted at rest, wherever it's being backed up to, and is it encrypted in transit? They care about those more than anything, is from a HIPAA perspective. From an IT person perspective, they're not asking the right question here. The real question is your backup on the same network segment as your production network? 9 times out of 10, the answer is yes. So I've seen 2 large organizations, both with over $4 million in ransom for each incident. Both of them had their backups on the same network segment. Now, what that means is, it doesn't mean that here's my production server with all my data, and here's my backup right next to it. What usually happens is, they create a VPN tunnel to an offsite data center, and they say, now we're offsite. But I can traverse that just like your backups can, just like an attacker can, and they go wipe out your backups in this offsite, just like they could have on your same network. So even though they're geographically dispersed, they're on the same authentication system. So if I can compromise one account on your primary network, I can use that account to go and attack the rest of your network. In one instance, the networks had separate authentication systems, but they used the same password. So when the attacker figured out the password on this side for an administrative account, he was able to see what the administrative accounts were over here, and through trial and error figured out that this password worked over here. So he was able to go in and still destroy the backups. Without backups, once you get ransomware, there is no recovery. You either pay it or you lose your data. Okay. Are all employees that are responsible for dispersing or transmitting funds provided anti-fraud training? Goes back into training. Before processing fund transfer requests from internal sources, does the applicant confirm the instructions via a method other than the original means of the instruction? That's really confusing. What they're saying is, if you need to do a funds transfer, how do you validate that both sides are authenticated in that process? How are you going to do that? Do the applicant's procedures require review of all requests by a supervisor or next level approver before processing fund transfers? So we'll skip through some of these. So it's all financial controls. This is interesting. So please identify your telecommunications carrier. Now this was pulled from a broker or a carrier called Beasley, and they're one of the big ones out there. So please identify your telecommunications carrier. Why do they care about that? Why do they care who your internet service provider or your phone service provider is? Well, they care because some of these phone service providers are not compliant with the regulation for your industry. So they want to make sure that whoever you're using is compliant with your industry. Have you established strong alphanumeric passwords for administrative controls of your telecommunications system? Well, that seems like it's kind of a vague question, right? You think to yourself, well, my password has to be complex on my network, and I know my employee's password, so we're just going to check that box yes. Well, this is a completely different system than that. This could be your firewall. It could be a third-party cloud-hosted PBX phone system. All those use different authentication mechanisms, and if you haven't enabled multi-factor authentication and those systems get compromised, it's another way to get into your network outside of the systems inside your network. It's kind of a really confusing thing, but all these systems today, they all talk to each other. So if you're an administrator on one side, that may make you an administrator on the other. Let's see, have you configured your telecommunications systems to disable remote system administration, internet protocol access, dialing via remote system access? Basically, they're just saying, don't let anyone get into your system. If you have a telecommunications system, only allow access from inside the network. So someone has to be in the network before they can get into it. This goes back to vulnerability scanning. Okay, so this starts to get into like the agents that we would use as an IT service provider or your IT department within your organization. Do you filter scan incoming emails for malicious attachments and or links? We all know what spam filtering is. It's been around a long time. When we think about email, we think spam filtering is what I need to protect myself. Well, you need a lot more than that today, because spam is not the issue, it's phishing attacks. And phishing attacks are oftentimes spear phishing, where they use a legitimate email account to send you something that looks legit. Well, if someone does that, you need spam to try to block it. You need URL rewrite, because what they're going to send you is usually a URL, a website. that you would click on in your email, and it would take you to a malicious website that looks legit, like eBay or Office 365. It's going to ask for your password. You're going to put it in thinking it's legit. Now they have your password. Now they can log in as you and launch attacks. So URL rewrite in these systems, what it does is it takes that URL that they put in the email and rewrites it so that it actually directs it to the spam filtering company who analyzes that before they allow you to go to it. So you click on it, you go to their website first, they go, you can't go here. They log it, they send you something back, say, no, it's unsafe. So it protects you from those URLs that are in your email. The second thing that it does that's really important is called attachment detonation. If someone sends you an attachment, oftentimes Excel and Word will have macros. Very common attack vectors to have an Excel macro that can kick off things in your computer, grant someone, a malicious attacker, access, install software, download things, do a lot of bad stuff. When you have a attachment detonation, what it does is your spam filter takes that attachment, detonates it into what's called a sandbox on their side, looks to see what it's trying to do. If it's not trying to do anything that worries you, they release it and let you have it. If it's trying to do something that worries them, they block it for you. So it's a lot more than spam filtering these days. Do you strictly enforce SPF on incoming emails? Well, that's one that no one would know in this room unless you asked your IT people. So it's Sender Policy Framework. All that is that's a record on the internet within basically your DNS provider, and it says what IP addresses can access your email, okay? It's not a hard setup. It's literally about 20 seconds for your IT guy to set that up. No big deal. It will also greatly increase your deliverability of your email. I don't think they have it on here, but there's another one called Dmarc. Dmarc is another setting on your email that will greatly increase deliverability because a lot of companies now, if you don't have SPF records, if you don't have Dmarc, they won't even receive your email. They're blocking it pretty much across the board. Are external emails tagged to alert your organization's employees that the email originated from outside the organization? You know, that's a good one to have. That's really handy. So what that really stops, and it's really just the one thing that's most important, and that's those emails that purport to be from someone within your organization, sending someone else in your organization an email saying, transfer funds, do this, and it looks like them, it's got their email address up there, but what the system is smart enough to know that that person came from outside the organization. So it puts a little red banner or whatever saying this came from outside, and when you see that, that is your big red flag to know, wow, this is not from Susie in accounting, this is from outside of there, let's figure this out. Now, I'll give you a funny story. We had a client that every time he'd get something he thought was spam, he'd forward it to us. And so we would get these emails, and we were looking at them and like, okay, yeah, that's spam, that's spam. Well, over time, our spam filtering system started to block those. So we stopped getting them for a while, and we didn't think about it. You know, my guys are just doing their jobs. And one day I get an email from him, and he's angry. I have sent you 10 spam emails, and no one's responding to me. So I had to go look, and oh, they're all in our spam mailbox. So I had to apologize. I'm sorry, our system works. So maybe you should buy it. And so we sold him spam filtering so that he could have the same protection that we had against the spam emails that he was forwarding to us. So it's great to have those controls. Does your cybersecurity awareness program include phishing training and testing? These are really important. When we talk about security, cybersecurity of your organization, the first line of defense is your employees. They're the ones that hold the door open. I mean, if someone walked to your door and they've got a gun and they're tapping on the glass with a gun and say, hey, mind if I come in? I just want to get a glass of water. You're not going to let them in, right? I mean, that's just obvious. Well, your employees should know what a threat looks like. Train your employees so they know what an email threat looks like so they can identify it. And there's a lot of things you can do to identify a threat. And an employee has the ability, if they're properly trained, to identify every threat that can possibly come through. So get them trained on how to identify. Now, when we talk about testing, this is something that if not done well, will upset your employees. And I've seen that several times. What testing is where you craft a fake phishing email. And there's tools that do this for you, right? These tools will send a phishing email to all your employees on a schedule. They look legit, right? Does anyone here have their company do this? Yeah. And if you fall for them, you often get sent to remedial training. Now, the way to do this right, well, let me say, the way to do this wrong is every time an employee falls for it, go write them up. Let's make it really punitive. Let's make this where the employees don't want to read email anymore. You know, they stop checking email, they're just terrified. No, don't do that. The way that you're supposed to do that is you reward the employees who can identify the phishing emails. So you can do something like a $5 Starbucks gift card every week for the employee who catches the most fish. And several of these, Know Before is a big one. There's another one called Breach Secure Now. And they have a plugin. Reach Secure now has one called Catch Fish. It works in your browser works in your Outlook client. And so when you see something that looks like phishing, you can click Catch Fish. If that's a phishing email, it drops confetti, you get the recorded that you caught one, and whoever catches the most fish at the end of the month or whatever, they can get a Starbucks gift card. Make it fun, don't make it punitive. Do you use Office 365 in your organization? Now, Office 365 is a great platform, there's nothing wrong with it. They're asking that question not because they're saying, oh, well, that's going to count against you. They're asking that question because if you do use Office 365, that means your email is outside of your organization. It's in the internet. It's not running on a server like what we used to call an Microsoft Exchange server in-house. And when it's on the internet, you have to protect that in certain ways. And so one of the ways to protect that is using Microsoft's Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection. That's Microsoft's spam filtering and all their protections that they have. Now here's the confusing thing. When the people that write these things for these insurance companies write them, they don't really give you a way to answer that question because we use a solution called Proofpoint. It's just another spam filtering solution, does the same kind of things as Advanced Threat Protection, but I have to answer no here because we use something different. So when you go through this process, just make sure if you answer no, you need to be able to answer why. So they should usually have a section where you explain that. Your IT team should be able to do that for you. But what the big thing here is, what they really want to know is this multi-factor authentication. Without multi-factor authentication, the chance of getting your email address or your email account compromised in Office 365 is very high. We had a CEO of a client, and the CEO got an email, purported to be in Office 365, said that something about how your password was no longer valid, please click here to change it. He clicked it, and he put in his email address, and he put in what he thought his password was, and the next thing you know, his account is sending emails to the tunes of thousands to other people with phishing emails and so on. Well, your reputation is pretty much in the toilet once that happens. So if he had had multi-factor authentication, which he does now, if he had had that can't happen. So, and we're going to get into multi-factor authentication a little more on the next few slides, but briefly, does anyone here have multi-factor now? Do you have it with your email, your computers? So multi-factor authentication is what you have what you know, which is like know your password, so that's the first factor, and then something you have, which is usually the second factor. Something you have can be a push to your phone where you can approve to be able to log into your email or your computer. It can be a token that has like 6 digits if you've done banking. I'm sure you've used RSA keys with banking before, same kind of thing. And then there's several other ways that you can do that as well. Okay, so the big change that we've seen on on insurance is the ransomware supplemental. It's not enough to just have to answer your cyber liability insurance. Now they have this thing called a ransomware supplemental, which dives in even deeper because ransomware is the real threat, so they want to dive in deeper on that. And that is here. Do you use malware protection or malware, however you want to say it? I'm from Oklahoma, it's malware. So, use malware protection or endpoint detection and response tools. Malware protection be like, it's like an antivirus basically. There's different ones out there. Endpoint detection response is relatively new in the last few years. It is a fantastic tool. As far as I know, nobody's been compromised using an endpoint detection and response tool with ransomware, but it's expensive. I mean, you're looking at probably $10 or more per endpoint per month to have one of those tools. But what those tools do is they specifically stop ransomware. They also stop viruses, they do a lot of other things. But what they'll do is they tie into the volume shadow copy service, which it's a fancy word for something that allows you to go back to a previous version of a file that gets infected on your system. So when they identify ransomware, they can take and roll back to a previous file version, clean up the system, isolate the attack vector, and prevent it on all the other systems. It's very smart. It's AI-driven system. Very, very smart, but also very expensive. So they named some of the common solutions: Carbon Black, Cisco AMP, CrowdStrike, Falcon, Cylance, Endgame, Symantec EDR, Windows Defender. And that Windows Defender, one thing I want to be really clear about, Windows Defender is free on all Windows computers. That is not the same thing they mean here. Windows Defender has a subscription license that gives you the features they're talking about. Windows Defender that is free on your computer that's not a protection. That doesn't count. Nobody's going to count that as a real security solution. It's not centrally controlled. You can't get any reporting. You can't set policies on it. It is individually on each computer, and all the settings are on that computer. To use multi-factor authentication, and now this is an important distinction because we've been asked this before. So when we talk to a hospital, so multi-factor authentication, it's something you have, something you know, right? You know your password, you have a token or a phone that you can receive a login and get into the system. What happens in our hospitals is they look at us and they say, well, I don't think we need it for anything except coming in from outside our network. So we've got VPN tunnels that come in, so we want multi-factor on that. Okay, that makes sense, I agree with that. We also have a terminal server, so we want to have multi-factor on that. Okay, I agree with that. We don't want it on any of our computers because I don't want my doctors having to walk up and log in and then also have to have a second form of authentication. And I don't want my employees to have a token so they have to log into their computers. They've gotten smart at the insurance companies, and now they're starting to actually spell that out. To protect privileged user accounts, for remote access to your organization's network, they split them out. They used to just have, do you use multi-factor authentication? Last year is what they had. Now this year it's for remote access. Yes, everyone's going to want that. To protect privileged user accounts. Now, privileged user account can be identified as several things. It could be your administrators, your IT team. Like my IT team, if we get into your servers or our client servers, we use multi-factor on our client network. So if my guys get into your servers, they have to use MFA. Whether you have it or not, we install it when we use it, because that's a way for me to protect you, and by protecting you, I protect myself. But for you, your IT team should have this on for all administrators, but we're advising that every single employee have it on their computer. And it's going to protect you from being able to get someone logging into your system, getting access external from your organization. If you're familiar with tools like Log Me In, Go to My PC, Screen Connect, those tools are things that oftentimes employees or third parties will install on your system so that they can get access when they want to have access. It may be totally legitimate, but without a second form of authentication, if those tools get compromised, then those attackers can get into the system. If you have multi-factor authentication on all computers in the network, nobody can get in without that second form of authentication, and that is key. Do you have a secure, hardened baseline configuration which is regularly reviewed and updated by someone with security expertise and or in line with industry standards? Think of that really as like your HIPAA risk assessment in a lot of ways. If you're doing a regular HIPAA risk assessment at least once a year is what we recommend. You're reviewing all of your HIPAA safeguards. You're probably getting that done. But this is really saying, are you going that far, if not further? And then when they ask you to explain this, they're going to expect a 20-page write-up of what you're doing, because that's how much it would take to write up a true baseline security configuration. You have established processes for rapidly applying critical security patches across servers, laptops, desktops, and managed mobile devices. That goes back to what I was talking about before. Patching is not something like Windows Update where you just turn it on and it's on and you're getting patched. Patching is a centrally controlled and managed process. It has to be. There's no way around that. You can't just count on Microsoft Windows Update to apply patching. Not only that, you have to have a management for whitelist, blacklist of software that's in your network. If you have an employee who installs iTunes and they put it on the computer, well, that iTunes has known vulnerabilities if you get past a certain age on the software without updating. So you need to have something that is updating every kind of software on your systems and removing it, identifying it as allowed or disallowed. We use a software called ThreatLocker. And ThreatLocker identifies, when you initially deploy it, it goes throughout the whole system, it looks at everything that's being installed, everything that's running on the network. Once it's done, then it allows us to go in and choose what is allowed to run on the network, any process, services, and so on. And then we can make it so that when an employee tries to install something that's on a blacklist, it's denied. If it's on a whitelist, it's allowed. So we can say Zoom. Zoom releases an update once a week. If you're not a local administrator on your computer, when Zoom releases that update, you got to have your IT guys come out and put the update on, or you just disregard it for a long time and eventually you get fed up, so you got to get the update. With this solution, you can be authorized to do that update without having to involve your IT team. Let's see. Do you route all outbound web requests for a web proxy? Most people don't do this, but one thing I'll say, if you have a modern firewall, if you're an organization that has a modern firewall, that means it's subscription-based. It has things that protect your organization at the perimeter of your network, where you connect to the internet. Things like content filtering, and intrusion protection, intrusion prevention, GeoIP. GeoIP looks at all the IP addresses allocated to the entire world and says, these IP addresses are allocated to the Ukraine and Russia. I have no business that I do with them, so I don't allow those public-facing IPs to touch my network. So those are really smart things that you can put in. It's not exactly what a true web proxy is, but it does a lot of the things that a web proxy would do. WebSense and Blue Code are really more DNS filtering solutions. It kind of comes back to, do the insurance companies really understand what they're asking? Not entirely. But DNS filtering, WebSense and Blue Code are agent-based and perimeter-based content filtering. Like I talked about before, when I typed in HOTMALE, if the company had had a content filtering solution on there blocking pornography, that would not have gone through. So it would have protected me, it would have protected the organization. When we think about web filtering, a lot of the times what people think about is social media. I don't want my employees wasting time on social media. I don't want them going and looking for jobs. I want them productive, and that's why I don't want to allow eBay and Monster.com and all that, right? That used to be what it was originally designed for, is to create productivity in the workforce when people didn't have high-speed internet at home and they'd go to the office and had high-speed internet and they wanted to search and watch YouTube videos. Well, that's evolved. Now it's about protecting the employees from accidents and mistakes or going somewhere they shouldn't go. And so, this WebSense and Blue Code usually are agent-based, and they will run on a computer, so even if that employee leaves and they take their laptop to a hotel, they've got some content filtering protection there and some auditing that goes along with that. All right, do you take regular, at least monthly backups of your key server configurations and data? If you're not taking daily backups of your data, you're probably making a big mistake, because a monthly backup is just not enough unless your organization can afford to survive for a month. So what we look at, one of the first things that I usually talk to companies about is what is their RPO and RTO. RPO is recovery point objective, and RTO is recovery time objective. RPO, recovery point objective, is how much, I was going backward, recovery time. How far back can you afford to have data loss? So if you say I back up once a day, you can have 24 hours of data loss. RTO is recovery time objective, and that's how long can you afford to be down. So when calculating those two things, what we look at is if your whole infrastructure, you're going to start with the worst thing, your whole infrastructure burns down, or you get ransomware and lose all your data. How long can the hospital afford to be down before we actually can get you operational again? So if you say to me, we can be down for a day, I build your infrastructure different than someone that says I can be down for an hour or a week or whatever, right? So you need to know what your RPO and RTO is, and how you know that is by calculating it. I mean, so for instance, let me give you an example. Infrastructure burns down, you've got all your data, it's all in a backup, it's in an offsite repository on, say, Amazon or Microsoft Azure. And you've got 5 terabytes of data out there. You've got a 100 megabit internet connection, and you're going to recover. Well, number one question, where are you going to recover to? All your servers are gone. If you were to go to buy a server today from Dell or IBM or HP, how long do you think it's going to take to get one with a chip shortage? You could be looking at months to get another server. So you got your data, but you can't get it down to your servers. So in that case, maybe it's better to be able to have a backup solution that can spin up in a cloud environment so you can continue to be functional while you're waiting for new servers to come in. It's how you figure out how you're going to survive when these things happen. Another one is if you're backing up daily and you do one daily backup, use 24 hours worth of data, you're gone, I need to restore, it's 24 hours of data gone, how long will it take you to get that data put back in the system? Your employees are already probably working at max capacity, now they got to do double input, try to find the data where it's stored, where it might be at. So RPO and RTO are two key things that you need to use to calculate your business's recoverability. Are your backups encrypted? That goes back to HIPAA, and HIPAA says you have to be encrypted at rest and in transit. Now, HIPAA is a dirty word. I don't even like bringing it up because people are like, get out of my office, I don't want to talk to you. I just want my hospital to operate. And so HIPAA, when it talks about encryption, it's just good security practice. Encrypt your data at rest, encrypt your data in transit, and that way your electronic protected information cannot be intercepted going from your facility to whatever backup repository you're using in the cloud or to a third party. Make sure that it's encrypted there as well. And most backups are. Are your backups disconnected from and inaccessible through the organization's network? As I mentioned before, most of the ransomware incidents that were unrecoverable without paying the ransom was because the attacker destroyed the backups as well as the production servers. And there's a thing called dwell time. When attackers get into a network, how long they stay in that network before they launch the ransomware incident. Right now it's about 45 days. So that means from the time someone got into your network, they spend 45 days doing all kinds of research, going through your whole network, looking for where your backups are located at, trying to compromise more accounts, trying to get more things before they, under their control, so when they launch their ransomware, they can guarantee that you're going to have to pay. Because if they kick off ransomware and your whole system has great backups off-site that they haven't touched, well, the organization's just going to go, well, this stinks, but we're going to recover and we're good. They just wipe everything, recover, lose maybe 24 hours worth of data, they're operational. So they want to be in your system for about 45 days. That's the average ransomware, or average dwell time right now for a ransomware attack. Let's see. And you want them to be disconnected. Again, separate authentication, separate location, not on the same network segment, no way to traverse from point A to point B except through your backup software. Do you test the successful restoration and recovery of key server configurations and data from backups? That's an important one. Again, what I said before, early on, was if your company is doing backups and they're just trusting the automated software to say this was a successful backup, they're wrong. That's not good enough. You have to literally restore the servers into a virtual environment, into what we would call a sandbox. Watch the operating system load up, get into the applications, make sure they function. Because backups they fail all the time. We do backups for a lot of organizations, and it's daily. We actually have a software we pay for called Backup Radar. Backup Radar looks at our backups. Because it wasn't enough for us to look at the backup failures, we have to look at successes. Because if you don't get a success and you don't get a failure, does that mean everything's working? It means that the system is so broken that it can't even send you a failure. So we have a software that looks for the alerts for failures and successes, and if we don't get either, it creates a ticket in our system, and now we gotta go look at it. So last thing in the world you want is a whole bunch of failures you didn't know about because some change happened and the alerts can't be sent. So you gotta have a system that monitors the system that monitors the system to make sure all the systems work. And it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. Do you use credentials unique to backups that are stored separately from other user credentials? That's very important. All right. So I don't touch on every single product or service, but I'm giving you kind of an idea of what those things look like to make this happen. And one of the things also to keep in mind, you don't have to buy and do everything that your insurance broker says. But what they won't tell you is they won't tell you that if you don't do this, here's your cost. Or if you do this, this is how much it goes down. What they want you to do is tell them where you're at, and they're going to decide if they're going to cover you or not. And if they decide they're going to cover you, then they're going to tell you what the price is. But there's no haggling. If I do this, how much is my price? If I do that, how much is my price? And doing these things is going to cost more than the insurance costs every time. And if you're weighing these solutions against, well, my insurance premium is $20,000 a year, but the IT company is going to charge me $100,000 a year in agents and controls, that's the wrong calculation also. The calculation shouldn't be insurance is my first offense and it's cheaper, so I'm going to go with that over the security controls, because you're going to find out that these insurance companies are no longer going to be paying out. Like I said, 50% or so of the insurance carriers out there are no longer carrying ransomware.
That's exactly. We see insurance companies not carrying it all.
Yep.
They say you're going to have to move, and we're giving you, and we're telling you that in 90 days we're no longer going to be pulling out.
Yeah, we had a client of ours, it's a 250 employee hospital in Oklahoma, lost their carrier, no incidents, no ransomware. They've got all of our security suite, everything, didn't matter. They're just no longer carrying the policies. They don't know how to calculate it. They don't, I mean, it's all smoke and mirrors to most people, and even me as an IT professional, it's still, there's so much room for anything to go wrong. And again, like I said, your first line of defense is your employees. Well, if you just have one employee who's careless, you can, no matter what I do, can still take down the network. And the insurance companies realize this, and they don't have a way to really guarantee they're going to make money and mitigate that risk. So it's really hard for them to figure out how to do it. The ones that are staying in it, like I said, they're going up in price, This is the third year, ours will triple because we serve the healthcare industry. Hospitals, everyone's seeing that as well. Alan Lovelace, you'll hear me talk about him a lot. We have I interviewed him here about 2 months ago, right? I think so. Region 9. It was fantastic, great information from Alan. And as the CFO of Stillwater Regional, and he said I think he was spending about $20,000 a year on insurance for that. I think it was $2 or $3 million policy, and they dropped him once his ransomware incident happened. Completely dropped him, and he doesn't know what his new premium is going to be, but he's figuring it's going to be a whole lot more than it was before. They went from spending just under $400,000 a year on cybersecurity to well over $1 million in zero to nothing. I mean, just immediately when this happens, you just got to spend the money. So here's some tools. Subscription software-based security solutions. So we talk about centralized patch management. That's going to be an agent. It's going to run all your computers. It's going to manage all your patching. It could be a tool that's ran by Microsoft. There's a free one that you can use. I think they changed the name. I've got guys doing this now, so I'm getting a little rusty on the terms, but it used to be called Windows Software Update Services and WSUS. So you can run those. There's no cost if you're a larger organization with the skill set to manage those and you keep your costs down. For smaller organizations or use third parties, you need to make sure that your company that is managing that is using a tool to do so. Phishing testing and training, there's a cost per employee to do that. That has to be set up. You need to have skilled people that know how to manage it and run it. Endpoint detection response, that's that antivirus type solution that's on steroids. It's really good protection against ransomware. Multi-factor authentication, there's several companies, Okta, Duo, that are out there. Duo is the one that we sell. It's owned by Cisco. Nobody ever got fired selling Cisco, so we use Duo. Security incident event management system. These are really expensive. These are really expensive. The cheapest one that we can sell, I think, comes out to about $25 an employee. So if you've got a 1,000 employee hospital, that gets really expensive. So what is a SIM? A SIM does a few things, and there's different ones out there, and some of them do different things. And there's overlap. A lot of these tools overlap with feature set too. That's another thing. You can't just buy something that covers each thing you need. There's going to be some overlap as well. So a SIM, a security incident event management system, think of it, it's a log aggregator. So all the things going on in your network, how files are being transferred, how accounts are being created, how everything's going on that creates a log, gets aggregated up into a cloud repository, and then you can actually search that repository and you can manipulate that data, and the system has an intelligence about it, artificial intelligence, that looks at those and reacts to everything going on in your network, from things trying to get into your firewall. Something comes to your firewall, it touches a server it shouldn't be on, the system identifies it, isolates it. It's a really powerful system that they're really proud of. They're really expensive. And the logs, I mean, we're talking about storing logs for everything, and your computers are creating logs every fraction of a second, and it's storing those, and it's analyzing them, and it's trying to protect your network. But boy, they come at a price. And they're great, but they're really expensive, and they take a lot of skill to manage effectively. Content filtering. We talk about content filtering, that's on the perimeter. You can have that on your firewall or a content filtering hardware device in your network, but that only protects what's inside your network. We would advise that you have an agent-based content filtering as well, so that when people leave your network with their laptop, they still get content filtering and protection when they're on the road. So all your road warriors need to have that. Privileged access management. This is fairly new. We just started seeing this show up on insurance requirements this year. Privileged access management. Most small organizations, IT departments and third party, make it easy on everyone. They just say everyone's a local administrator on their computer. They can install anything that they want. They can do anything that they want on their computer because, you know, if the employee wants to install a printer, they want to go download some software, need to update their electronic medical record systems, the employee has the ability to do that. It's less work for the technical staff. Those days are gone. Nobody can do that anymore because the ability to install something is the same as saying, I'm okay with not being compliant with regulation or having any security. Because if your employees can go out to, anyone remember the old website 2Cows where you could download shareware and freeware, and I don't know, it's probably still around. There's CNET. There's tons of free software out there that employees will download and try to install. Those softwares are oftentimes malicious, just like I was saying about letting your grandson or son hold your phone and install software. You don't let people do things like that. You need to control it. And the way you do that is you remove what's called local administrative rights on workstations. That means that nobody can do anything on their workstation except the things that you authorize them to do. Privileged access management is an agent that will run on the workstation, only allow the employees to do the things that you say they can do, only install software that you authorize, only change things that you say they can change, and so on. And that prevents an attacker from getting getting on that computer and being able to operate anything malicious or install their own payload, because that employee can only do the things that they are authorized to do. So don't overlook these things. These are just configurations. There's no cost. There's just some labor in getting it done, having your IT team or your third party configure these things. So if you've got like obsolete Server 2008 servers on your network, well, those have been obsolete for 2 years. Get rid of them. Get new servers, right? You know, that's not agent. That's not ongoing. That's just one sunk cost to make it happen. Set complex passwords. Have your passwords expire. Set a screen lock timer. That's just minimum. These are just HIPAA compliant basics. Use minimum necessary access in your electronic medical record system. Make sure that no employee has access they shouldn't. Go through all of your employees' job descriptions and decide what access they should have based on their job description. Make that flow from HR all the way through to your organization, okay? Make that all tie together. Make it tie together how your employee terminations and your hiring happen. When you terminate an employee, does the IT team know to go remove those accounts, disable access, archive the email? Make sure all that flows together throughout the entire organization. Involve your IT team in that decision, well, not necessarily the decision, but in that process. Let's see, user account management. One of the things we'll see when we do an assessment is we'll go in and a hospital will have 3,000 user accounts and 90 active employees because they've never disabled an account when an employee left the organization. Well, that means that that employee can get access still. They can walk in, go to a terminal, maybe still log in. So make sure that the IT team knows as people are coming and going, they should be also responsible for removing those accounts. AD integrated wireless. This is an interesting one. We like to do this a lot because when we go into a rural hospital specifically, they'll have a wireless, it'll have a static SSID, static password, web key, and every employee that comes and goes, they don't change it when an employee leaves. So that employee can come up, sit in the parking lot, get on their laptop, and be on the network. It's not allowed. So if you tie that to Active Directory, and you have your policies all the way through from hiring to termination, from HR, your job descriptions, all the way through the process, when the IT team is notified that they have to disable access, all they have to do is disable that user's account, and now they've lost access to the wireless network as well. You don't have to change that static web key and SSID every time an employee leaves the organization. Network segmentation, segment your network. Your network should be broken down. This is, from an IT guy, this is virtual world stuff for everyone else, but for an IT guy, this is kind of a no-brainer. You have your voice stuff on one network, your servers on a network. You know, these are separate virtual networks, and then you can create isolation and security across those networks. No local admin users. You want endpoint encryption. There is no cost to do endpoint encryption. BitLocker's free. It comes on Windows. It's been free since Windows 10 Pro. This needs to be turned on. Now, when you turn it on, the key has to be stored somewhere. So there's a little bit of work there. If you use a third-party tool like a remote monitoring and management solution, or even with Office 365, it'll store the key for you in the cloud. Storing the key is important because if the hardware changes on that laptop or Microsoft releases a driver update, it may lock that computer out thinking that someone's tampered with it. So then you have to plug in the key to be able to get access. So really important that you store those keys. Create policies and procedures and have some software restrictions in to prevent software from being installed. Okay, this was just published. I'm getting really to the end. We about there? I'm getting to the end. I'm going to take questions here in a minute. But this was just published by an insurance broker in a group full of IT professionals that I'm active in. And what he's saying, market update rate forecast for insurance, is technology E&O is going to go up 35 to 50% for optimal risk. You know, optimal is not good for me. That means that I'm a low risk to them. I'm sorry, that's not me, and that's not you guys. 50% to 100% for less optimal risks. Well, I work in IT, servicing healthcare. I'm the most high-risk company that they can do business with these days. So my insurance for my company is doubling this year. I've already been informed. And so that was last year, and then this year is going to be the same thing. And it looks like it's going to be this year over year for the foreseeable future. More companies are going to drop out. It's going to narrow down the field of people that will offer cyber liability insurance. But keep in mind, you don't have to have cyber liability insurance. You don't. I mean, you need to check that. I mean, I make sure, because your banks may say you have to have it, someone may, but the federal government does not mandate it right now. So what you can do is do your research. But what I would say is whether you have cyber liability insurance or not, you should have this, an incident response retainer. So when you have an incident, when we talked to Alan Lovelace with Stillwater Regional Medical Center, we said, so what was the first thing that you did when you saw that this was happening? He said, well, we called our insurance broker. And then the insurance broker contacted everyone else that was involved, and we brought in a cyber incident team, and they came in and did all the forensics, figured out how they got in, helped us get it all secured so they couldn't do any more damage, they negotiated the ransom and so on. You can partner with an incident response, get an incident response retainer with a third party at a very low cost that will negotiate all that for you. You may find that you have more flexibility doing this than going to your insurance broker. You know, I've got kids, and my kids get into car accidents because, you know, they're my kids, that's what they like to do. And when they get into a car accident, do I want to have my insurance pay that? I mean, no, of course not, right? I'm gonna go pay that out of pocket so I keep my premium low for my kids because they're a high risk. You may find that this gives you some flexibility if you ever do have a ransomware incident. You might be able to get a company that can come in and help you recover at a low enough cost that you don't need to do an insurance claim. So this is a big deal. A lot of banks are using this pretty regularly. I've got several friends that are IT guys in large banks. One particular one, he has 2 incident response teams on retainer. A very large company that's national and a much smaller local company that he can call on in the event that they have an incident. That's all I got. So, what questions you guys got?
Tell me, this recently we heard about Windows had an issue with their print.
Print nightmare.
Print, yeah.
Yeah.
And I got to think, we're a small organization, but someone that's has a large healthcare that has all the physicians and the building department, all the computers. How does one stay on top of something that granular that really seems to have scared a lot of folks?
Well, I don't have a great answer because the answer it sounds salesy, and I don't want to sound salesy, but it is get you a trusted partner or have an internal IT guy or someone that tracks that for you. I mean, for my company, my guys, I've got a security guy on staff. He's a cybersecurity architect. And that's all he does. He's in all the forums and, anywhere there's a picture of a guy wearing a hoodie, he's in there somewhere trying to figure out what's going on, right? And when that one came out, it wasn't a huge threat unless someone already got in your network, right? Or the printer was accessible from the internet or whatever. So it wasn't a huge threat, but you still needed to remediate it, right? So we have tools that made it where we could do that from an economy of scale. So our several thousand endpoints, we just created a script that mitigated it globally. And we were done in a few seconds. But you're not going to have that as a small provider, and that's the difficulty. And I would say you should partner with someone that does cybersecurity for that. So, other questions? Anyone else?
The incident response, instead of insurance,
Uh-huh.
because our insurance broker says go to them,
Yeah.
and they'll help you out from there. They have a list of everybody, soup to nuts.
Yep.
But if you don't go to, what are the other companies charging? I mean, what's the estimate of?
It's not bad. I know one was several $100s a month just as a retainer, and they have rules on it. You're still going to pay. Your retainer's not covering all the work they're going to have to do. It's just now they're going to respond within a certain amount of time, and you get this fixed fee for that term and that duration, right? Now, I'm not encouraging people to get this instead of insurance. I still think insurance should be there. But one of the things I like to go back to as a kid, when I was a kid, I had my first accident. I was 16. I was really young. Only accident I had for years, and I hit this woman's car, and I get in my glove box and I pull out my insurance brochure, and it says, in case of accident, call us immediately. And I did. My parents lost their minds. Like, why are you calling the insurance broker? We're going to handle this. We don't want your insurance premium to go up and so on, right? So that's the way I look at it, is you do need to call your insurance broker, but if you've got someone involved like this, I don't believe the broker can tell you who you use. So I believe you can probably bring in who you want. It's just like when you have don't quote me on, I'm not an insurance guy. So I'm talking about the solutions that the insurance companies put in. You need to talk to your brokers and get answers on all that to make sure. But I would want to make sure that I had someone on retainer that I could call on outside of the insurance company, because you may not lose anything, right? You may not need to file a claim at all. So if you bring someone in that's a trusted, like FireEye or one of the big brands out there, they may be able to solve this all for you without having to go to the broker. That's where I'm going with it. So, because not every ransomware incident means it has to involve the insurance company. There's a lot of companies that will have a ransomware incident. They never even involve them. It may be a small incident. They lost a few computers and they just wipe them and reinstall them. It may be just they lost a few servers that weren't mission critical, like old servers that they haven't patched in a while, and they just wipe them out and they move on. The big ones you hear about are when they lose everything or the vast majority of their systems.
Just like the Stillwater CFO said, who do you call first?
Yeah. Well, you don't think about it. But that also goes back to one of my other points on the slide, is that's part of your incident response plan, and you should have one in place in these incidents, and everyone should have one for ransomware, because you don't want to be sitting there going, I don't even know what to do. Do I call my attorney? Do I call my insurance broker? What do I do?
The FBI? You think the FBI would want to know? And he goes, nope.
Yeah. Well, they can't do anything. That's not really, it's just not what they do. I mean, they fight cybercrime, they try to track down the attackers and so on, but when it comes to your actual attack, they're not going to go in there and do the forensics to figure out who was the attacker or so on. It's just not what they do. So, more questions? Anyone? I charge by the hour, so this is free. All right, well, that's all I've got. Oh, you got a question?
Are there any technology solutions like having your mirror backup? I recall an article in one of the journals where, you know, they were asking a bunch of CIOs, how do you deal with this? And the one guy said, we don't really care.
Yeah.
We have a mirrored backup, and they do that. Finally, we shut it down. We operate from the other one. We clean it, and we're back. They never went down. And it was a big Western healthcare system. Is that sort of the
It's
standard?
completely viable. It's expensive. It is expensive to do. I mean, that's the big gotcha. The smaller providers are not going to have that.
It's less expensive than, you know, being down or anything.
It is
Sort of
not.
cost of doing business anymore.
You know, I hate to say it, but a lot of people just don't think that way. They just don't think, you know, that it's ever going to happen to them. That's the ones that get hit, right? They don't put in the replication, or they don't put in the backups, they don't put them off-site, or they don't understand the technology at all. They just trust someone's doing it without verifying. You know, there's a lot of things that cause that to kind of to happen. You know, budgets are constrained, especially in rural healthcare right now. I mean, there's not a lot of money to go around. The COVID money kind of flooded in, but there's not a lot of money out there to do it right. As a company that does assessments for rural hospitals, they don't understand the technology. They don't have the budgets for it. A lot of them don't have skilled technology professionals anywhere near them that can get them through that process. And when they look at how much it costs to get IT done right, it's really hard for them to swallow. And I'll give you a number. There's a company called Service Leadership International. They kind of determine, they allow companies like mine to know what the pricing structure should be for what we sell to make sure we can provide best-in-class services. And they tell us what our gross margin should be, how we should deliver services, and we take that into consideration as we build our pricing model for our clients. And the pricing usually comes out to about $150 to $250 per employee per month to provide good support, service, and security across the board. So,
Does that include physicians?
yes, that would be anyone that's a computer user within an organization. That does not include things like projects, putting in new servers, putting in new desktops. It's support, service, and security alone. $150 to $250 a month. That is the going rate, and that's nationwide. So it adds up quick, and most hospitals are not used to spending that. Gartner did a report back in 2018, I think it was, it may have been 17, but they did a report on the average cost of IT, just IT as a whole, for medical practices in the US. I can't remember exactly what their pool of, it was like several thousand, like 6,000 people they pooled. And the average cost at that time was about $7,000 per employee per month for all IT needs. That's your EMR licensing, the devices themselves, the hardware, the support, and so on. That's a lot of money. I mean, it's a lot of money. So I'm sorry, that wasn't per month, that was per year. I gave you, it was per year. It's about $7,000 per year. So it's a lot of money. Good.
Is this your recording?
Yes.
How can we get a copy? I'd like to share with our IT person.
Sure. Yeah. You can just PayPal me. No, we'll send you links. So we'll send it out to everyone that attended.
Okay.
So.
If you will make sure you at least give me your card, name.
And then we can put you on a marketing list too.
Make sure
So.
you get it. Or you can send it to Brian.
Yeah, we'll get it to. We'll make sure everyone gets a copy. So.
In your presentation, you had a lot of things about something, a little blip in there. Road warriors, that we needed to have something. You got a lot of road warriors in this room. What was that little tidbit that you had on one of the slides? I saw it about 6 slides back. Oh, there it is. Content filter.
Yeah. So Road Warriors should have several things. One of the popular things right now, there are several companies doing this thing called, it's always on VPN client. And there's also another one that does what they call it Zero Trust. Zero Trust is a big buzzword in everywhere. It's a really expensive way to try to protect environments. But you can run an always on VPN, which isolates your computer from the rest of the infrastructure around you, like you get on a network here and so on. So that's a pretty good solution. DNS filtering is great. Multi-factor authentication on your systems is good. Privileged access management on your systems is good. Let's see, forgetting one. The threat locker, that is a privileged access management system kind of on steroids. It's really powerful. It does restrict the ability to install things on your network, but it also does some other really good active blocking of threats. So those would be the ones that I would say a road warrior would need more than anything. if you're a road warrior and use a VPN client to connect into your network, my fear as an IT guy is more what could happen on your computer that gives, and then you get access to my network. I don't like VPN myself. I don't really like people coming in on VPN into any of my client networks, because when you connect to VPN, it's a virtual connection to our network. It makes you sit directly on my network for someone else's network. So what I like is, if you're a road warrior, I'd rather you come into a Citrix environment where you get a virtual desktop, or you get a terminal server where you have a virtual desktop there that is completely isolated from your computer. It's coming in through a different connection that's like SSL encrypted. So, other questions? That's all I got. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the time to talk to everyone.